The red dust of Kepler 442b swirled around Jake Martinez as he wiped sweat from his forehead. The mining colony had been his home for 2 years now, and he thought he had seen everything this planet could throw at him. The massive drilling machines hummed behind him, carving deeper into the rocky ground in search of rare metals that would make everyone rich. "Jake, you need to see this," called out his drill operator, Tommy Wilson. The young man's voice carried a strange tone that made Jake stop what he was doing. Tommy had been working the deep shaft for 3 months, and nothing usually excited him. Jake walked over to the drilling site, his boots crunching on the loose gravel. The drill had stopped, which was unusual. These machines were designed to run for days without stopping. Tommy pointed down into the dark hole they had been digging. "Look at this," Tommy said, holding up a piece of metal that gleamed like no metal Jake had ever seen. It was smooth and seemed to change color as he moved it in the light. One moment it looked silver, the next it appeared blue, then green. The surface was covered with strange symbols that seemed to glow with their own light. Jake took the metal piece and felt a strange tingling in his hands. It was warm, almost alive. "Where did you find this?" "About 50 feet down." "But that's not the weird part." The drill hit something solid down there, something big. Jake looked down into the hole. The colony's lights couldn't reach the bottom, but he could see a faint glow coming from below. It was the same color as the symbols on the metal piece. "Stop all drilling," Jake ordered. "Get Dr. Watson down here right away." Dr. Amy Watson arrived within an hour, carrying her equipment and looking excited. She was the colony's scientist, the one who studied old things and tried to figure out what they meant. Jake had always liked her because she explained things in ways that made sense to regular people. "This is incredible," she said, examining the metal piece under her magnifying glass. "The craftsmanship is unlike anything I've seen. And these symbols, ... they're not from any known human or alien language." "So what do you think it is?" Jake asked. "I think you found something that was buried here long before humans or any known alien species reached this planet. We need to get down there and see what else is waiting." It took them 2 days to set up the equipment needed to safely descend into the hole. Dr. Watson went down first, followed by Jake and Tommy. The walls of the shaft were smooth as if something had melted the rock and reformed it. The deeper they went, the stronger the glow became dull at the bottom. They found a chamber that took their breath away. The walls were covered in the same glowing symbols, and in the center of the room sat an object that could only be described as a weapon. It was about the size of a rifle but looked nothing like any weapon Jake had ever seen. The weapon was made of the same color-changing metal as the piece they had found. Its surface was covered in intricate patterns that seemed to move when Jake wasn't looking directly at them. The most striking feature was a crystal core in the center that pulsed with a soft blue light, like a heartbeat. "My God," Dr. Watson whispered. "This is definitely not human technology. And it's not from any of the known alien species either." Jake felt drawn to the weapon. Something about it called to him, but he forced himself to stay back. "Should we touch it?" "Absolutely not. We need to contact the authorities first. This could be dangerous." Dr. Watson spent the next week documenting everything in the chamber. She took hundreds of photographs and measurements. The weapon seemed to respond to their presence, glowing brighter when they were near and dimming when they left. Sometimes Jake could swear he heard a low humming sound coming from it. The news of their discovery spread quickly through the colony and beyond. Within days, ships began arriving from across the galaxy. The Galactic Council, the governing body that represented dozens of alien species, sent their best scientists and researchers. The leader of the council team was a tall, thin alien named Vex-High. He belonged to a species called the Zenthari, who considered themselves the most intelligent beings in the galaxy. Vex-High had 4 arms and skin that shifted between purple and gold. His eyes were large and black, and when he spoke, his voice sounded like wind chimes. "Humans," Vex-High said with obvious disdain, "you have stumbled upon something far beyond your understanding. This is clearly precursor technology." "Precursor?" Jake asked. Dr. Watson explained. The precursors were an ancient civilization that disappeared millions of years ago. They left behind ruins and artifacts throughout the galaxy, but most are too dangerous for anyone to use. Vexai nodded. This weapon is classified as a Class 7 artifact. It must be removed from this planet immediately and taken to our maximum security facility for study. Wait a minute, Jake said. We found this on our planet. Shouldn't we have some say in what happens to it? The Xanthari scientist made a sound that might have been laughter. You humans are amusing. You think that because you dug something up, it belongs to you. This weapon could destroy entire star systems if misused. It will come with us. Despite Jake's protests, the council team began preparing to move the weapon. They built a special containment unit designed to hold dangerous artifacts. The weapon was carefully lifted from its resting place and sealed inside the transparent container. As they prepared to load it onto their ship, Jake noticed something strange. The weapon's glow was getting brighter, and the humming sound was getting louder. Dr. Watson frowned as she checked her instruments. The energy readings are increasing, she reported. It's almost like it's waking up. Danny Clark had been working as a security guard for the colony for 6 months. He was 24 years old, from a small town in Ohio, and had taken the job to pay off his student loans. He wasn't particularly brave or smart, and he often wondered what he was doing so far from home, but he took his job seriously. When the alien scientists asked him to do a routine security check on the containment unit, he didn't hesitate. He walked over to the transparent container and looked at the weapon inside. The moment Danny approached, everything changed. The weapon's glow became blindingly bright, and the humming sound turned into a musical tone that seemed to resonate in his bones. The containment field, designed to hold the most dangerous artifacts in the galaxy, flickered and failed. The weapon simply passed through the walls of the container as if they weren't there. It floated through the air, moving with purpose and intelligence, and came to rest in Danny's outstretched hands. The moment Danny's fingers touched the weapon, the world exploded into light and sound and sensation. Images flooded his mind, vast, star-filled battles, ancient civilizations, and a darkness that consumed everything in its path. He saw the weapon's true name written in his thoughts, the Harmony Blade. When the light faded, Danny found himself holding the most powerful weapon in the galaxy. Every alien scientist, every council representative, every person in the room was staring at him with a mixture of fear and confusion. Danny looked down at the weapon in his hands, then up at the crowd of frightened faces around him. He did what any normal person would do in such a situation. He said, I think there's been some kind of mistake. Image description for Leonardo AI. A young human male in a security uniform stands in a futuristic mining facility, holding a glowing crystalline alien weapon. The weapon is rifle-sized with a pulsing blue crystal core and intricate metallic patterns that shift between silver, blue, and green colors. Around him, various alien scientists with different skin colors and multiple arms look on in shock and confusion. The scene is set in an underground chamber with glowing symbols on the walls and mining equipment visible in the background. The lighting is dramatic, with the weapon casting an ethereal blue glow across everyone's faces. Danny Clark stared at the weapon in his hands, still not believing what had just happened. The Harmony Blade felt warm and alive, like it was breathing. The blue crystal in its center pulsed with a steady rhythm that matched his heartbeat. Strange. Symbols flowed along its surface like liquid light, and he could hear a soft humming sound that seemed to come from inside his own head. Put it down immediately, Vexai commanded, his forearms waving frantically. The Xanthari scientist's skin had turned from purple to a deep red, which Danny had learned meant he was angry or scared. You do not understand what you are holding. I'm trying, Danny said, looking down at his hands, but I can't let go. It was true. No matter how hard he tried to open his fingers, they wouldn't obey him. The weapon wasn't stuck to his hands. Exactly, it was more like his hands refused to release it. Every time he tried to set it down, his arms would move to keep it in his grip. Dr. Watson stepped forward carefully, her scientific instruments beeping rapidly. "Danny, can you tell me what you're feeling right now?" "It's weird," Danny said, his voice shaking slightly. "I keep seeing things, like movies playing in my head. There are these huge battles in space, and cities made of light, and something dark that's eating everything." The images came in waves. Danny saw massive ships fighting in the emptiness between stars. He watched as entire planets were swallowed by a writhing darkness that seemed to be alive. And through it all he saw warriors carrying weapons like the one in his hands, fighting desperately against something that couldn't be stopped. "The precursors," Dr. Watson whispered. "You're seeing their memories?" More council representatives arrived over the next few hours. They came from every corner of the galaxy, each species convinced they had the right to claim the weapon. The Nexus Collective sent their most advanced robots, their mechanical minds calculating thousands of possibilities every second. The Veilter arrived with their telepathic abilities, confident they could simply take the weapon from Danny's mind. Each group tried their own approach. The Zenthari attempted to use their superior intelligence to reason with the weapon. The Nexus Collective tried to interface with it using quantum processors. The Veilter focused their mental powers on breaking the connection between Danny and the Harmony Blade. Nothing worked. Every time someone approached Danny with the intention of taking the weapon, it would glow brighter and make a sound like singing. If they persisted, the weapon would simply disappear from Danny's hands and reappear a moment later, as if it had never left. When one particularly aggressive hegemony soldier tried to grab it by force, the weapon created a barrier of light that knocked him backward without causing any real harm. "This is impossible," muttered Commander Zara of the hegemony forces. She was a tall, muscular woman with gray skin and tactical implants covering half her face. "Our psychic evaluations show that humans have one of the lowest mental capacity ratings in the galaxy. How can this primitive creature bond with precursor technology?" Danny wanted to be offended, but he was too confused to care about insults. Back on Earth, he had been a C student who worked part-time at a grocery store. He wasn't special. He wasn't chosen for anything. He was just a guy who needed money for college and thought working on a mining colony sounded like an adventure. Doctor Watson ran test after test on Danny. She scanned his brain, analyzed his blood, and studied his genetic code. The results were always the same, completely normal. There was nothing in Danny's DNA or brain patterns that would explain why the weapon had chosen him. "I don't understand," she told Jake Martinez as they watched Danny from across the room. "By every measurement we have, Danny is an average human. His IQ is normal, his reflexes are normal, his psychological profile shows no unusual traits. Yet somehow, he's bonded with the most powerful artifact ever discovered." Jake shrugged. "Maybe that's why it picked him. Maybe it wanted someone normal." The weapon seemed to be learning from Danny. As the hours passed, it began to respond to his emotions and thoughts. When he was nervous, it would pulse gently, like it was trying to comfort him. When he was curious about something, symbols would appear on its surface, showing him images and information he couldn't quite understand. The most unsettling discovery came when Danny accidentally triggered what Dr. Watson called a memory cascade. He had been thinking about home, missing his family and friends, when suddenly the weapon showed him something that made his blood run cold. The darkness he had seen in the earlier visions wasn't just from the past. It was still out there, waiting between the stars. The weapon showed him monitoring stations throughout the galaxy, ancient devices left by the precursors to watch for signs of this threat, and those stations were beginning to wake up. "Something's coming," Danny told Dr. Watson, his voice barely above a whisper. "The weapon is trying to warn us about something terrible." As if responding to his words, alarms began sounding throughout the colony. The communications officer, a nervous young woman named Lisa Parker, ran into the room with a tablet in her hands. "We're receiving signals from all over the galaxy," she reported. "Ancient installations that have been dormant for millions of years are suddenly active. They're all sending the same message." "What message?" Dr. Watson asked. Lisa's face was pale. Warning, warning, the void stirs. Prepare for the darkness. The weapon in Danny's hands pulsed brighter, and suddenly he understood more. The precursors hadn't just disappeared. They had been consumed by something from outside normal space and time. These void wraiths existed in the spaces between dimensions, feeding on consciousness and technology. The Harmony Blade and the other? Weapons like it were created as a last defense against this threat, but the weapons wouldn't work for just anyone. They required something that most species had lost as they became more advanced, the ability to act without personal ambition. The weapon had chosen Danny not because he was special, but because he was genuinely trying to help without wanting anything in return. Admiral Torvik of the Hegemony arrived with a full battle fleet. He was a massive alien with thick armor plating, instead of skin and eyes that glowed like red coals. His species had conquered dozens of worlds and believed that might made right. "Human," he said, his voice booming through the colony's speakers. "You will surrender the weapon immediately, or we will destroy this entire colony." Danny looked around the room at all the people who had become his friends. Jake Martinez, who had been like a big brother to him, Dr. Watson, who had patiently explained everything and never made him feel stupid, Tommy Wilson and Lisa Parker, who had welcomed him when he first arrived. Even some of the alien scientists had been kind to him. "I can't give it to you," Danny said into the communication device. "I don't think it would work for you anyway." "You dare defy the hegemony?" Admiral Torvik's S-ships moved into attack position. "You have 1 minute to comply." The weapon in Danny's hands began to sing, not the gentle humming he had grown used to, but a clear, beautiful sound that seemed to fill the entire colony. Images flashed through his mind, showing him what the weapon could do. He saw shields that could protect entire planets, energy beams that could stop fleets, and something else that made him gasp. The weapon wasn't meant to be used by one person. It was designed to connect with others, to create a network of consciousness that could stand against the void wraiths. But it would only work with beings who genuinely cared about each other, who would fight not for glory or power, but to protect the people they loved. "Dr. Watson," Danny said, his voice stronger now, "I think I'm beginning to understand. This weapon didn't choose me because I'm special. It chose me because I'm not trying to be special. I just want to help." The countdown reached 0. Admiral Torvik's ships opened fire on the colony. But as the energy beams struck, the weapon in Danny's hands created a barrier of light that surrounded the entire settlement. The attacks were absorbed harmlessly, and something amazing happened. Every person in the colony, human and alien alike, suddenly felt what Danny was feeling. They experienced his confusion, his fear, but also his genuine desire to protect them. They understood that he wasn't trying to claim power or become a hero. He was just a scared young man who wanted to do the right thing. The barrier didn't just stop the attack. It somehow transmitted Danny's emotions to the attacking ships. For the first time in galactic history, the hegemony forces felt what it was like to be truly selfless. They felt Danny's love for his friends, his homesickness, his determination to help even when he didn't understand what was happening. The weapon's fire stopped. Admiral Torvik's voice came over the communication system again, but this time it was different, softer, confused. What did you do to us?" he asked. Danny looked at the weapon in his hands, then at the faces of his friends around him. "I think," he said slowly, "I think we just showed you what it means to be human." Image description for Leonardo AI. A confused young human male in a security uniform stands in the center of a futuristic room, holding a glowing crystalline alien weapon with pulsing blue light. Around him, various alien species with different skin colors, multiple arms, and strange features look on with expressions of shock and bewilderment. Some aliens have robotic parts, others have telepathic headpieces. The silence that followed Admiral Torvik's confused question lasted for what felt like hours. Danny stood in the center of the room, still holding the Harmony Blade, while everyone stared at him with new understanding. The weapon had somehow shared his feelings with the entire hegemony fleet, and now they were all trying to process what they had experienced. Captain Lisa Hayes was the first to break the silence. She commanded the human defense vessel New Horizon, a small ship that had been patrolling the outer colonies when the crisis began. Lisa was a career military officer with short brown hair and steady green eyes. She had seen combat before, but nothing like this. "Danny," she said, stepping forward carefully, "are you okay?" "I think so," Danny replied, though his voice shook slightly. "The weapon, it's trying to teach me something, but I don't understand most of it." Dr. Watson was busy studying the readings on her instruments. "The energy signature has completely changed," she announced. "It's not just responding to Danny anymore. It's actively communicating with something else." As if to prove her point, the weapon in Danny's hands began to glow brighter. The symbols on its surface moved faster, and suddenly holographic displays appeared in the air around them. The displays showed star maps, but not like any Danny had seen before. These maps showed the galaxy as it existed millions of years ago, when the precursors were still alive. "Look at this," Dr. Watson said, pointing to one of the displays. "These are the locations of ancient monitoring stations. And according to this data, they're all coming online." Commander Pete Rodriguez had arrived with his mining ship Perseverance, just as the crisis was unfolding. He was a veteran of the mining colonies, a tough man with weathered hands and a kind heart. He looked at the holographic displays with the practical eye of someone who had spent years reading survey maps. "Those stations are positioned around the galaxy like a warning system," he observed. "If something was coming from outside our galaxy, these would be the first to detect it." Danny felt a chill run down his spine. The weapon was showing him more images now, clearer than before. He saw the void wraiths as they truly were, not creatures of flesh and blood, but living holes in reality itself. They consumed everything they touched, leaving behind empty space where matter and energy had once existed. "The precursors built this whole network to fight them," Danny said, his voice growing stronger as the weapon's knowledge flowed into him. "But they failed. The void wraiths ate their entire civilization." Admiral Torvik's voice came over the communication system again. This time, there was no anger or threat in his tone. "Human ... Danny ... we felt what you felt. The weapon showed us your memories, your emotions. We have never experienced anything like that before." "What do you mean?" Danny asked. "When my species conquers worlds, we do it for the glory of the hegemony. When the Xanthari pursue knowledge, they do it to prove their superiority. But you genuinely care about the people around you without expecting anything in return. We did not know such feelings existed." Vexhai, the Xanthari scientist, stepped forward. His skin had changed from red back to its normal purple, and his large black eyes seemed different somehow. "Softer. The weapon chose you because you possess something we have lost," he said. "The ability to act without personal ambition. My species has spent so long trying to be the smartest that we forgot why knowledge matters. It matters because it can help others." The revelation was spreading throughout the galaxy. Every species that had been touched by the weapon's power was beginning to understand what humanity brought to the galactic community. It wasn't superior technology or military might. It was something much more valuable, the ability to remain genuinely good even when given power, but there wasn't time to celebrate this breakthrough. The ancient monitoring stations were sending increasingly urgent warnings. The void wraiths had detected the harmony blade's activation and were beginning to push through the barriers between dimensions. Dr. Watson's equipment began detecting strange readings from the edge of the galaxy. "I'm getting reports from observation post near the galactic rim," she announced. "Entire star systems are just disappearing." Danny closed his eyes and let the weapon show him what was happening. The images were terrifying. Stars that had burned for billions of years were simply winking out of existence. Planets with entire civilizations were being consumed by a darkness that left nothing behind. "How long do we have?" Captain Hayes asked. The weapon pulsed, and Danny felt the answer in his mind. "Maybe 3 days before they reach the populated systems. Maybe less." The various alien species began to panic. Some wanted to flee to the far side of the galaxy. Others suggested surrendering, hoping the Void Wraiths might spare them. A few, like the Hegemony, wanted to gather their fleets and fight, but Danny knew none of those options would work. The weapon had shown him the truth about the Void Wraiths. They couldn't be reasoned with, outrun, or defeated by conventional weapons. They were antithetical to existence itself. "There is a way," Danny said, his voice carrying a certainty that surprised even him. "But it requires all of us to work together, not just humans, everyone." "What do you mean?" Admiral Torvik asked. Danny looked around the room at the faces of his friends and the alien representatives. "The weapon isn't meant to be used by one person. It's designed to connect with others, to create a network of consciousness that can stand against the Void Wraiths. But it only works with beings who genuinely care about each other." Commander Rodriguez nodded slowly. "Like a team, but bigger." "Exactly. The precursors failed because they tried to use the weapons individually. Each species fought alone, thinking they were the only ones who mattered, but humanity has something different. We know how to work together, even with people we don't agree with." Dr. Watson was studying the holographic displays with new interest. "The network spans the entire galaxy. If we could activate it properly, it would create a barrier that the Void Wraiths couldn't penetrate." "But how do we activate it?" Vexhai asked. "The technology is beyond our understanding." Danny smiled, and for the first time since this whole crisis began, he felt confident. "We don't need to understand it. We just need to trust each other." The weapon in his hands began to sing again, that beautiful sound that seemed to touch everyone who heard it. But this time, other sounds joined it. From across the galaxy, other weapons were awakening. Weapons that had been waiting in ancient vaults and forgotten temples, waiting for the right moment to be found. Captain Hayes received a message from her ship. "Captain, we're detecting energy signatures from archaeological sites across human space. It looks like more weapons are activating." "That's happening everywhere," reported a Nexus Collective representative. "Our databases show similar activations on worlds belonging to every species in the Council." Danny felt a moment of overwhelming joy. The weapon wasn't just connecting with him anymore. It was reaching out to others, looking for more people who could put aside their own desires to help protect the galaxy. "Jake," Danny said, turning to the mining foreman who had become like a brother to him, "I think I'm going to need your help organizing this. And Dr. Watson, will need you to coordinate with the other scientists." "Captain Hayes, Commander Rodriguez, can you help get our people ready?" "Ready for what?" Jake asked. "To save the galaxy," Danny replied, "and to show everyone that the best way to fight darkness is to stand together in the light." The weapon pulsed brighter, and suddenly Danny could feel other minds touching his. Humans across the galaxy were finding weapons, and each one was adding their voice to a growing chorus of hope and determination. Admiral Torvik's fleet moved into protective formation around the colony. The Xanthari began sharing their knowledge freely instead of hoarding it. The Nexus Collective offered their computational power to help coordinate the effort. Even species that had been enemies for centuries began working together. For the first time in galactic history, the various species weren't just coexisting. They were truly united, brought together by the simple human understanding that some things were more important than individual glory. Danny looked up at the stars, knowing that something terrible was coming for them all. But he also knew that they weren't facing it alone. Humanity had given the galaxy something it had never had before, a reason to hope. The Void Wraiths were coming, but they would find a galaxy ready to fight back. Not with superior weapons or advanced technology, but with something much more powerful. The unbreakable bonds of friendship and the determination to protect the people they loved. Image. Description for Leonardo AI. A young human male in a security uniform stands at the center of a large command room, holding a glowing crystalline weapon while holographic star maps float around him. Various alien species, including military commanders, scientists, and representatives from different civilizations, stand together in a circle, no longer looking hostile but united and determined. Human officers in space uniforms stand alongside. aliens with different skin colors, robotic beings, and exotic creatures. The scene shows ships visible through large windows, with the weapon's blue light connecting everyone in a network of shared purpose. The atmosphere is one of cooperation and hope despite the approaching danger. The alarm started screaming at 3 a.m, waking Danny from the first real sleep he had managed in days. The Harmony blade, which he now kept beside his bed, immediately began glowing bright red. Through their connection, Danny felt a wave of terror and urgency that made him jump to his feet. "Danny, get to the command center now," Captain Hayes' voice crackled through the communication system. Her usual calm was gone, replaced by barely controlled panic. Danny ran through the corridors of the colony, still wearing his pajamas and clutching the weapon. Other people were running too, their faces pale with fear. He could hear crying from some of the residential areas, and his heart sank. Whatever was happening, it was bad. The command center was chaos. Dr. Watson stood in front of a massive holographic display that showed the galaxy, but something was wrong with the image. Large sections of stars were simply missing, leaving dark holes where entire systems used to be. "What's happening?" Danny asked, though part of him already knew the answer. "They're accelerating," Dr. Watson said, her voice shaking. "The void wraiths aren't just consuming the outer rim anymore. They're moving toward the core worlds at incredible speed. We estimate 48 hours before they reach Earth." Jake Martinez was coordinating with mining ships across the system, trying to evacuate as many people as possible. His usually steady hands were trembling as he worked the controls. "Danny, we've lost contact with 12 colonies in the last 6 hours. They're not destroyed. They're just gone, like they never existed." Through the weapon, Danny could feel the approaching darkness. It was vast beyond imagination, a hunger that had consumed galaxies before this one. The void wraiths weren't just creatures. They were the opposite of existence itself, drawn to consciousness and life like a disease drawn to healthy tissue. "How many weapon bearers do we have now?" Danny asked. 317 confirmed, reported Commander Rodriguez, who had arrived with a convoy of refugee ships. "But we're losing some. The closer the void wraiths get, the harder it becomes to maintain the connection. The fear is overwhelming some of them." Danny closed his eyes and reached out through the network. He could feel each weapon bearer scattered across the galaxy like points of light in an ocean of darkness. Some were strong and steady, like Sarah, Kim on Earth, who was organizing the evacuation of major cities. Others flickered weakly, struggling to maintain their connection as terror consumed their thoughts. "We need more than just weapon bearers," Danny said, opening his eyes. "Dr. Watson, what did you learn about how the precursors tried to fight them?" Dr. Watson pulled up new data, her fingers flying across the holographic controls. The precursors made the same mistake most species would make. They tried to fight the void wraiths with technology and individual heroism. Each weapon bearer fought alone, protecting their own world or system. It wasn't enough. What would be enough? Captain Hayes asked. The weapon in Danny's hands pulsed, and suddenly he understood. The visions came clear and strong now, showing him what the precursors had discovered too late. The weapons weren't designed to be used separately. They're part of a single system. When they work together, they can create something the void wraiths can't touch. What kind of something? Jake asked. Danny struggled to put the images into words. A barrier. Not made of energy or matter, but made of consciousness itself. The combined will of everyone who refuses to give up. But it only works if we're all truly connected, not just the weapon bearers, but everyone. Admiral Torvik's voice came through the communication system. His fleet had taken position around the most populated systems, ready to fight even though conventional weapons were useless against the void wraiths. "Human Danny, my warriors ask how they can help if they cannot touch these creatures." "By believing," Danny said, the words coming from the weapon as much as from his own thoughts. "By trusting that we can stop them even when everything looks hopeless. The void wraiths consume existence, but they can't touch hope. They can't understand why beings would risk everything for others." The first real attack came 6 hours later. Long-range sensors detected a void wraith vanguard entering the inhabited regions of the galaxy. Unlike the probe they had faced before, this was a full assault force. Dozens of the creatures, each one large enough to swallow a moon, moved through. Space like living shadows. Danny felt the network of weapon bearers preparing for battle, but he could sense their fear. Through the connection, he experienced what Marcus Jones was feeling on Mars as the creatures approached his world. The terror was so overwhelming that Marcus nearly dropped his weapon. "I can't do this," Marcus said through the communication. "Network, I'm just a rescue worker, I'm not a hero." "None of us are heroes," Danny replied, his voice carrying across the network to all the weapon bearers. "We're just people who care about other people. That's all we need to be." But even as he said it, Danny felt his own fear growing. Through the weapon, he could sense the true scale of what was coming. The vanguard was just the beginning. Behind them came a force so vast that it defied comprehension. Void wraiths that had consumed entire galaxies, led by intelligences that had existed since the universe was young. Dr. Watson was tracking their approach on every available sensor. "The main force will be here in 18 hours. My God, Danny, there are thousands of them, maybe tens of thousands." "How did the universe survive them before?" Commander Rodriguez asked. "It didn't in some places," Dr. Watson replied grimly. "There are entire regions of space that are just empty, not because stars never formed there, but because the void wraiths consumed everything that ever existed there. They've been feeding on reality for billions of years." Danny felt the weapon, showing him more. The void wraiths weren't evil in any way humans could understand. They were simply hungry, driven by an alien need to consume consciousness and existence. To them, the thinking beings of the galaxy were no different than food. They felt no malice, no hatred, just an endless, insatiable appetite. The vanguard struck the outer colonies first. Danny watched through the sensors as they approached Colony 12, home to 50,000 people. Energy weapons fired desperately at the approaching darkness, but the beams passed right through the creatures as if they weren't there. "Now," Danny said, reaching out through the network. "Everyone, focus on the people you want to protect. Don't think about the monsters. Think about the ones you love." The network flared to life, powered not just by the weapon bearers but by millions of ordinary people across the galaxy. Parents thinking about their children, friends worrying about each other, strangers who had never met but shared the simple desire to survive together, the barrier that formed around. Colony 12 wasn't made of energy or matter, it was made of pure human stubbornness, the refusal to let the people they cared about be erased from existence. When the void wraiths struck it, they recoiled as if they had touched something poisonous. For a moment, Danny felt what the creatures were experiencing. Confusion and something that might have been pain. They had encountered hope before, but never hope backed by such determined unity. Never hope shared by so many beings at once. The vanguard retreated, but Danny knew it was temporary. They were regrouping, calling for reinforcements. The main force was accelerating, drawn by the challenge of this unexpected resistance. "We stopped them again," Captain Hayes said, but her voice held no celebration. "For now," Danny replied. "But they're learning. Next time they'll come prepared for what we can do." Through the weapon, Danny could sense the approaching main force changing tactics. Instead of simply consuming everything in their path, they were focusing their assault. Every void wraith in the invasion was now heading directly for the worlds. Where weapon bearers lived? "They know about us," Dr. Watson said, reading the same data. "They're going to concentrate their attack on the network nodes." Danny looked around the command center at the faces of his friends. Jake, who had become like a brother to him, Dr. Watson, who had patiently explained everything without ever making him feel stupid, Captain Hayes and Commander Rodriguez, who had risked their careers to help, even Vexai and Admiral Torvek, former enemies who had become trusted allies. "Then we make our stand together," Danny said. "All of us in one place. If they want to destroy the network, they'll have to go through every person who believes in what we're fighting for." The weapon pulsed with approval, and Danny felt a moment of clarity. The precursors had failed because they fought as individuals. But humanity had learned something different in their short time among the stars. They had learned that the strongest weapon wasn't technology or psychic power. It was the simple willingness to stand together, even when standing together meant facing something that could erase them from existence. "Where do we make our stand?" Admiral Torvek asked. Danny looked up at the stars, knowing that somewhere in that darkness an ancient hunger was coming for them all. But he also knew that for the first time in billions of years, that hunger was going to face something it had never encountered before. "Earth," he said. "We make our stand at Earth. If the Void Wraiths want to consume humanity, they'll have to do it at the place where humanity began." Image description for Leonardo I. Earth looked smaller than Danny remembered as their ship approached the blue and green world where humanity had begun. He had been gone for almost a year, working on distant mining colonies, but coming home felt different now. This wasn't just a homecoming. This was humanity's last stand against something that had consumed entire galaxies. The space around Earth was crowded with ships. Not just human vessels, but alien fleets that had never worked together before. Admiral Torvek S. Hegemony battleships flew in formation with Zenthari research vessels. Nexus collective mechanical ships moved alongside organic Velter living ships. Even the proud ethereal fleet had joined them, their crystal ships glowing like jewels against the darkness of space. "I never thought I'd see this," Captain Hayes said, standing beside Danny on the bridge of her ship. "Every major species in the galaxy all working together." "They're not doing it for us," Danny replied, watching the massive fleet take position around Earth. "They're doing it because they finally understand what we're fighting for." Through the Harmony blade, Danny could feel the other weapon bearers arriving from across the galaxy. Sarah Kim had brought her weapon from the lunar colonies where she had been organizing refugee camps. Marcus Jones came from Mars with a group of rescue workers who had volunteered to help despite having no weapons at all. Elena Rodriguez arrived from the Outer Rim with medical supplies and a determination that shone through the network like a beacon. Dr. Watson was coordinating with scientists from a dozen different species, sharing everything they had learned. About the Void Wraiths, the information was grim. The creatures were less than 6 hours away, and their numbers were beyond counting. Sensors showed a darkness approaching that stretched across light years, filled with hungry intelligences that had existed since the universe was young. "Danny," Dr. Watson called from her workstation. "The weapon bearers are having trouble maintaining their connections. The fear is too strong as the creatures get closer." Danny could feel it too. The network that had seemed so strong before was starting to fracture. Some weapon bearers were losing their grip on the ancient artifacts as terror overwhelmed their thoughts. Others were pulling back, trying to protect their own worlds instead of working with the greater plan. "I understand," Danny said into the communication system that connected all the weapon bearers. "I'm scared too. We're all scared. But being scared doesn't make us weak, it makes us human." "Easy for you to say," came a voice from one of the other bearers. "You're the chosen one or whatever. The weapon picked you first." Danny almost laughed, but not in a mean way. "The weapon didn't pick me because I'm special. It picked me because I'm ordinary, because I'm exactly as confused and scared as everyone else, but I'm still willing to help." Through the network, Danny shared his memories with the other weapon bearers. His childhood in Ohio, working at a grocery store, barely passing his classes, taking the mining job because he needed money for college. He showed them his confusion when the weapon first came to him, his fear during the early attacks, his constant worry that he wasn't good enough for what everyone expected him to do. "See?" he said, "I'm nobody special. I'm just a guy who doesn't want to see people get hurt. That's all any of us need to be." The honesty seemed to help. The network stabilized as the weapon bearers realized they didn't need to be heroes. They just needed to be themselves, flawed and frightened, but willing to stand up for the people they cared about. Jake Martinez was coordinating the evacuation of Earth's major cities, but not everyone was leaving. Millions of people had volunteered. to stay and help however they could. They couldn't carry weapons or fight the Void Wraiths directly, but they could do something just as important. They could believe. "My mom called," Danny told Dr. Watson as they prepared for the final battle. "She wanted to know if I was eating enough and staying safe. I tried to explain about saving the galaxy, but she just kept asking if I had clean socks." "What did you tell her?" That I love her and I'm going to come home safe." Danny looked down at the weapon in his hands. "I hope I wasn't lying." The Void Wraiths arrived like a wave of living darkness, pouring into the solar system from the spaces between dimensions. They were even more terrifying up close than the sensors had shown. Some were the size of moons, writhing masses of shadow that seemed to eat light itself. Others were smaller, but moved with intelligent purpose, like hungry sharks circling their prey. The combined fleet opened fire with every weapon they had. Energy beams that could destroy planets passed harmlessly through the creatures. Nuclear missiles detonated uselessly against their shadow forms. Even the most advanced alien weapons had no effect on beings that existed outside normal reality, but the fleet wasn't really trying to hurt the Void Wraiths. They were buying time and showing the creatures something they had never seen before. Species that had been enemies for centuries, fighting side by side without thought of personal gain or glory. "Network activation in 30 seconds, Dr. Watson announced. "All weapon bearers, prepare for full connection." Danny closed his eyes and reached out through the Harmony blade. One by one, he felt the other weapon bearers joining the network. Not just the few hundred who carried weapons, but the millions of ordinary people who had chosen to stay and help. Parents thinking about their children, friends worried about each other, strangers who had never met but shared the determination to survive together. The network that formed wasn't made of technology or psychic power. It was made of something the Void Wraiths couldn't understand. Love, hope, friendship, and the simple human refusal to give up even when facing the impossible. When the creatures struck Earth's defenses, they hit a barrier unlike anything they had encountered in billions of years of consuming galaxies. It wasn't energy or matter, but pure conscious will backed by the stubborn determination of an entire species that had learned to care about others as much as themselves. The largest Void Wraith, an ancient intelligence that had devoured entire civilizations, recoiled from the barrier as if it had been burned. Through their connection to the network, Danny felt what the creature was experiencing. Confusion, pain, and something that might have been fear. "They can't touch us," Sarah Kim said through the network, her voice filled with wonder. "They literally can't understand what we're doing." But the Void Wraiths were learning. They began to change tactics, trying to find weaknesses in the barrier. Some attacked the edges, looking for gaps. Others tried to overwhelm specific sections with concentrated force. "The barrier is holding," Dr. Watson reported, "but they're adapting faster than we expected." Danny felt the strain on the network. Maintaining the barrier required constant focus from everyone involved. But as the battle continued, something amazing began to happen. The alien fleets that had come to help weren't just watching anymore. They were contributing to the network too. Admiral Torvek's warriors, who had spent their lives conquering worlds for glory, suddenly understood what it meant to fight for something bigger than themselves. Vexhai and his fellow scientists stopped trying to analyze the situation and simply chose to trust in humanity's strange approach to the problem. The network expanded beyond anything the precursors had ever achieved. Not just humans, but dozens of alien species, all connected by the simple understanding that some things were worth protecting together. The Void Wraiths found themselves facing something they had never encountered before. Not superior technology or overwhelming force, but genuine unity backed by the determination to protect something precious. They could consume matter and energy, but they couldn't touch the bonds between beings who truly cared about each other. One by one, the creatures began to retreat. Not destroyed, but simply unable to comprehend how to fight something built on cooperation instead of competition. They pulled back to the edges of the solar system, then beyond, returning to the dark spaces between dimensions where they belonged. Are they gone? Captain Hayes asked as the last of the shadows disappeared from their sensors. For now, Danny replied, feeling the weapon's certainty through their connection. They'll remember this place, remember what happened here. They won't come back to our galaxy. The victory celebration lasted for days. Ships from across the galaxy came to Earth to see the world that had somehow taught the universe how to stand together. But for Danny, the best part was much simpler. He sat in his childhood bedroom, the Harmony blade resting quietly on his old desk, while his mother brought him soup and complained about how thin he had gotten. Outside his window, he could see alien ships in the sky, but inside his room, everything was exactly as he had left it. So, you're going back to that space station? His mother asked, sitting on the edge of his bed like she had when he was little. Yeah, Danny said. They want to set up a permanent research facility. Study the weapons, make sure we're ready if anything like this happens again. And you're in charge of this facility? Danny almost choked on his soup. God, no, Dr. Watson is in charge. I'm just security, same as always, his mother smiled. Good. I was worried all this hero business might go to your head. Danny looked at the weapon on his desk. It still glowed softly, but the urgency was gone. Now it seemed content, like a job well done. I'm not a hero, Mom.